Hey everybody, and welcome back to another fun and exciting intermediate math class. Today we're going to be starting chapter number 8 in your books. Chapter number 8 is on page 296. And today we're going to be introducing bar graphs and basically taking that statistical information that we started to learn about in last chapter, and now we're going to be putting it into graphs. We're going to be just doing different things with it. So kind of just a continuation of chapter number 7, but going in a little bit different direction. So make sure that you write this stuff down, put it in your notes, and do your best to follow along, because there's quite a few different types of graphs and things that you'll need to know by the end of this chapter. All right, let's go ahead and look down here at the screen. The first type of graph that we're going to talk about is the bar graph. Now, this is one that you probably already had, third, fourth, fifth grade. You've already seen this. This is not brand new information. Maybe it is for some of you. If it is, then pay special attention. If it's not, you still better pay attention, because there's probably things that I'm going to teach you that your last teacher didn't teach you, because every year we build on these concepts. So you get a little bit of it last year. I'm going to give you more next year and more the year after. So it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. But you're going to need what I teach you this year. All right, so the bar graph is a visual representation of data that uses vertical or horizontal bars to illustrate the data. What does it mean to illustrate? It's like painting a picture. So we're going to paint a picture in somebody's mind. All right, so let's look at this bar graph that I have on the screen here for you. We're going to kind of go through the different parts and pieces of this bar graph. So if you look right up here, this says this is the title of the graph. So what is the title? The title is School Supplies Students Use. Okay, now we know, really, with the title, we basically know what we're looking at. We are looking at school supplies, and we're looking at school students, okay, and the ones that they actually use. Very clear title, perfect. We now know what we're doing. So now, once you kind of like start looking over the graph, you're going to see these, these really pretty colors right here, and you're thinking, okay, what does this mean? There's some key things that help you to understand what this means. First of all, this line right here, this line going up and down, this is called the number of supplies. I would call this the number axis. These lines right here, this line on the outside, and then also this line here at the bottom, these lines are called axes, or an axis. And what the axis does is it kind of gives you a starting point. Notice right here we start with 0, 0. The corner of the axis is always 0, and as we go up, we are gaining numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 as we go up there on the axes. Now, this one here on this side, this one that goes up and down, is called the vertical axis because it goes up and down. The vertical axis says that in this case, that the name of this axis is called the number of supplies. So this is going to be like how many supplies, the total number that are being used. Down here, this axis along the bottom is called the type of school supplies. Like, what does type mean? Like the kind, the name of the school supply being used. And then look, this says right here, these are the labels of the categories. So we have pen, scale, pencil, sharpener, eraser. I mean, who uses a scale at school, right? I don't even know what this is, right? Who uses a scale? But anyways, maybe they have to weigh something in school. I'm not really sure. But these are different names of the different supplies that are being used in the school by these students. And, I don't know who they surveyed. This is probably from a survey. This is probably from some sort of a scientific study. But that's where the information comes from. Remember, in last chapter, we were talking about the sandwiches, like the ham sandwich and the peanut butter and jelly sandwich and the tuna sandwich. You could do that on here. You could build a bar graph based on that information. And then if you see right here, this is called a scale. And so these numbers right here
are actually called a scale. As you go up, you're going up. In this case, by ones. Different bar graphs have different scales. So this could be, we could change this to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and so on. And then we change the scale, don't we? And so now those are going up by tens. What if we changed it to 100, 200? We can change the scale to whatever we want to change the scale to based on our information. Maybe your scale goes 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Maybe your scale goes 50, 100, 150, 200, something like that. But scales always go what's called incrementally, in increments of, in this case, increments of 1. In the case of 50, 100, 150, 200, increments of 50. But in other words, all of these lines are spaced the same amount of space apart. Let's go down here and let's look at some of these words that I've written down. A scale, we just mentioned that one, is used to show the values that each bar represents. So these scales, these numbers right here, each bar now we can see. So for instance, the pencil bar goes to the 8. So we know that 8 students used pencils. Okay, so 8 students used pencils. Well, they had to write with something, right? So look, the other 2 students used pens. So they must have had like 10 students surveyed in this course or in this class or whatever it was, okay? So 8 used pens, 2 used pencils, and then you could see the ones that use sharpeners, the ones that use erasers, and the ones that used scales. I don't know what they did with scales, but anyways. Okay, the next one is labels. So labels are the words that tell you what the data that you're looking at actually represents. So these are the labels. We're looking at pens, pencils, scales, sharpeners, and erasers. That's what those bars are talking about. The axis, I've already talked about those. The vertical and horizontal. The pencil, pen, scale, those are horizontal. The numbers are the vertical. So up and down is vertical, left and right is horizontal. And then the grid lines. The last thing that I haven't really talked about are these lines that you see on the graph. Okay, so every so often there's a different line. Now, these lines are what's called grid lines. And what are the grid lines there for? They don't serve any purpose other than helping the person to follow the line over. So if the pink line, they can follow that grid line over to 5. Imagine if those grid lines weren't there and you're looking over here at this pink one and you're trying to figure out, okay, how many? And you might be saying, well, is there 4, 5? It's kind of a little bit hard to tell. You might have to get like a piece of paper, a straight edge, and put it on there and, help yourself follow it over. So the grid lines are helpful so that you can follow it across there and you can see, okay, what is it actually talking about? All right, let's continue on. Let's actually do this. Let's look at this one. This one's in your book. This is on page 419. It is example number 9.1a. So we have the diameter of the planets. What does diameter mean? Well, come on, you're math people, right? So the diameter of the planet is, okay, so here's our planet. That's a goofy looking planet, but the diameter is the distance through the planet, okay, from one side of the planet to the other. That's the diameter through the center of the planet. All right, so as you can see, Mercury is the smallest planet. How do you know that? Because you're following these grid lines, right? In this case, these darker grid lines, these are what's called the major grid lines, okay? And notice every 10, 20, 30, 40 major grid lines are always numbered, okay? So now, like this one right here, this little lighter colored grid line, this one is called a minor grid line. And if you look, this grid line is not even numbered down here. It's between 100 and 110. So what is that? That grid line is actually the 105 grid line. But we don't have the 105 marked. Why not? Because it's a minor grid line. and we don't always mark the minor grid lines. We mark the major grid lines. Not super important that you know that, but I wanted to mention that to you as we cross this part right here. Okay, another thing. I mean, those grid lines, the only thing, again, that they're there for is they're there to help you to follow the line down so that you can see, okay, because look, this is a long ways down here, right? So if there was no grid line, it might be a little bit more challenging. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this. Mercury basically goes right to the line. It goes to the minor grid line. So when we come down here, we would say, okay, that's 5. But look at this, okay? Look at this title right here. It says that this is a diameter, and it's in the thousands of kilometers. So for every 5, we're not talking about 5 miles. We're not talking about 5 kilometers. We're talking about 5, it says right here, thousand, okay? So that's 5,000. So Mercury has 5,000. Now look at Mars. Mars goes just a little bit past this, right? So this can be a little bit confusing when we come down here. And you might say, well, I don't have a grid line for that, so I don't know what that is. You're right. But it's a little bit past the 5, but it's not quite to the 10 yet. So maybe we would say that that's 7,000, 6,500, something like that. What we do in graphing is we don't give accurate numbers. We're not worried about giving precise numbers. If we wanted to give precise numbers, then we would write it right next to Mars or something. Okay, Mars is 7,212. We would write that here so that somebody knew the exact, or we'd write it even, right here in the bar, something like that. But typically, when you're doing graphing, we're not worried about the exact figure. We're worried about giving somebody like a picture of the basic concept of the data that they're looking at, not the specifics. All right, so we're going to say that Mars is 7,000, let's just say. Okay, guess. Take a guess at what you think that that bar should say. All right, so look at Venus. Venus goes just past the bar. So maybe we would say that's 10,000, 11,000, something like that. Okay? All right, so let's go down here to these questions, and then let's answer these questions real quick. Which planet has the largest diameter? Well, look at Jupiter, way over here. Almost 140,000, 45,000, 143 maybe. That's a big planet. Okay? Which planets are less than 40,000? So you'd go over here to the 40, okay? And then look here. So we got 40. Which ones are less? Well, these guys right here. Mercury, Mars, Venus, and Earth. Look at how much bigger Jupiter is than Earth. Whoa, right? Jupiter's huge. Earth is pretty big. I don't know if you've been around the place or not, but Earth's a pretty big deal. But Jupiter is like 10 times the size. It's crazy. All right, so next. What is the approximate diameter of Earth? So we're going to zoom in kind of here on Earth. Look, that's 10, and that's 15. It's about right in the middle, right? So what's between 10 and 15? 12.5, something like that. So we might say 12.5 on that. 12,500 is what I mean by that, kilometers. You're just estimating. Notice it says approximate because we don't care about the exact number. All right, last thing I have for you in this lesson is the stacked bar graph. Sometimes you will see bar graphs that have other things stacked on top of each other. A stacked bar graph is several categories represented in each bar. Look, we've got kind of this dark color down here, and then we've got this lighter color, and then we've got this really light color, and then we've got this almost white color up here at the top. So there's 4 different things. Well, how do you know what's going on there? Notice it just says Group 1. We don't know what Group 1 consists of. Notice we have to have what's called a legend. A legend is a key indicating what the different segments of the bar mean. Here's the legend right here. The legend tells us that the dark ones are 1. 1 what? We don't know. This is not titled. This is not a great graph because it doesn't have a title on it. So we don't really know what we're talking about right now. We could call it something. We could make up whatever we wanted. But we know that the dark one is, let's call it first graders. I don't know. The lighter colored one is second graders. This yellow one is third graders, and the white one is fourth graders. Okay? So if we didn't have the legend, we wouldn't know what those different colors mean, but with the legend, it helps us to know.
All right, that's all I have for you in this lesson. Hopefully you learned something there. Make sure that you go ahead and get into the book, do the practice problems, do the homework there, and just practice these. And maybe it comes easy to you. Maybe you're like, yeah, I know all this stuff. Well, keep practicing it because these graphs are going to get a little bit more challenging as we go through. Most of you maybe have seen the bar graph before, but there are some other ones coming up. So make sure that you're kind of plugged in here and you're following along. If you missed anything there, make sure to slide it back, watch it again. That's all I've got for you in this lesson. Have a good one. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.